Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Ones Ready podcast. Trent here, alone again. Aaron is out somewhere talking about politics and knots, and somehow he's going to make those two things go together because PJ. Jared is currently hanging on a bar with weights attached to his ankles, because he's short and he's trying to get taller. We keep telling him it's not going to work, but he tells us he's a chief and he knows what he's doing. So there you go. It is what it is. Before we get into the subjects, which is going to be a good time today, I want to talk about some of our sponsors. Our newest sponsors, S4FE-D, or safety as if it was on a license plate. These folks make wipes that can clean anything. If you're cleaning weapons or blood, guts, whatever it is, head over there to the website. They have all the details and use the code Ones Ready to get yourself a discount on these. They're super rad. If you shoot a lot, if you're coming into contact with disgusting things on a regular basis, and you need a way to clean your hands and clean yourself, and you want to know that you're actually clean, like say you're going home to kids and all that other stuff, it's a good thing to have. So head over to S4FE-D safety. Look them up on Instagram or online.com and use the code Ones Ready to get yourself a sweet discount. And also, we're going to talk about 18 Alpha Fitness. Kevin is the best. If you need a program, head over to Kevin at 18afitness.com. Use the code ONE-READY, the number one ready, and get yourself a discount. One of the things that Kevin is great at is taking you from where you're at and getting you to where you want to be. And as you're thinking about becoming a student or a cone or a candidate, whatever we're calling it today, and you want to work on just doing what you're told, and being held accountable for your actions, and kind of figuring out what it's like to do somebody else's workout that's not your own, that you didn't come up with today, over and over and over again. If nothing else, that's a good reason to head over to Kevin and get one of those programs. If you're an old guy like me, has old guy workouts. If you're a BJJ person, part of that cult, he has that stuff as well, because Kevin is an all-around dangerous person. So head over there, get yourself a program, use the code number one ready, and that's 18afitness.com. So on our group notes, right, we have a bunch of podcast ideas, things that kind of like a stream of consciousness between all of us. And I was like, dude, we have a million ideas in here, and we just never get to them all. So I'm just going to start. I'm just going to go down the list. I'm going to start marking them off, and you're going to get my fairly unfiltered opinion. I don't think this is going to be a members only, just for members. My last podcast I did by myself, I got a little heated, and I think the guys are going to do some reaction videos to that as well. And so that was for members. This one is going to be, I think, a little bit for everybody. So, or we'll see, whatever. I'm not the CEO of the company, so I'm just here to talk into the microphone when the other guys are off doing whatever they're doing. First one is, why do we keep acting like trauma is a bad thing? So this is like a cultural thing, right? Where we all think that in like the 50s, 60s, all the way through the 90s, everybody just tried to ignore their trauma, right? The whole like man thing, all the other things, that if something bad happened to you, the idea was just to suck it up and move on. And for some reason, or it seemed like we had some negative outcomes with that mentality. But today, it seems like all we want to talk about is trauma. All we want to do is tell everybody that they had a traumatic childhood, that anything that made them upset is trauma that they need to get over. They need to go to a therapist. They need to talk about their feelings and all this other stuff. And just like everything else in life, there is a positive and a negative, and most of it depends on your attitude about the situation. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't traumatic events that are going to stick with you, or float back up to the surface if you just try to ignore them for too long. And, I would be lying if I said I didn't have any of these experiences where, something happens, or like you lose a teammate, and, like the stuff that we talk about. And then 5 years later, you're driving into work and you're really stressed out, and like you have a, wife and kids now. And, then you see the name, this is really getting really specific. You see the name of a road, and it's named after one of the guys that was lost on one of your deployments, and it just kind of brings everything back, and it all rushes back up to the surface. And you go into work and everybody's upset about whatever is happening right now because life is chaos. It's the middle of GWAT. And then you go up to your boss's office and he tries to tell you how to do your job because he cares, and yeah, everything can snowball real quick if you don't take care of it. But at the end of the day, I think I've done a pretty good job of taking most of the things that would be considered, big events, traumatic events, and turn them into positives, right? Just like you could look at the pipeline and say that that is a traumatic event. You could look at all the training that we go through. They're emotional events, like I've talked about it on here before. Like, it's not like we exist without fear. It's not like the first time jumping out of a plane was not an emotional experience, was not scary in some way. It's not like, you know, water doesn't scare me. It's all these things are terrifying the first time you do it. And then going through some of the experiences downrange, like but there's two things, right? Like, getting shot at and shooting back and winning is like the greatest feeling in the world. But it's also a very emotional experience. And losing teammates is a terrible experience. But all these things wrapped up in one. If you take a step back and you look at your experiences, you're going to have a choice, a couple choices. Avoidance is probably not the best policy, right? And I think that's been pretty well proven. But B, there's a lot of positives there if you let it be positive. And I think the more egotistical and self-serving we are with our memories, the worse it is. It'd be easy to look at, people that we love that die and think that they weren't, grown-ups that made their own decisions, and think that, they are super unhappy to be gone, or that they would want us to be sad for the rest of our lives. And I just don't think that's the case. Like, it's not about me. I was there for the event, but I was lucky enough to know these people. I was lucky enough to go through certain situations. I was lucky enough to be present during some of the craziest times, in in our country's recent history. Like, I got to participate in a lot of things. I got to know a lot of people. Was it difficult? Yeah. Are there some things that I had to deal with later on? Yeah. But the positives that came out of that, like what I was able to learn about myself, the motivation I was able to give myself to live in a way that would you know represent what those people would want that are no longer here with us, live a life that they would be proud of. Like, all of those things and can be positive. And so I'm not saying that trauma is always a good thing, but there comes a time when you just can't wallow in your own self-pity anymore. All right. And as a culture, we're getting real deep in this stuff. And so, and you see it, I talk about it too in the pipeline, like adopting a victim mentality. If you're a victim of something, you're doing a lot of thinking about just you. You're not thinking about how you can help other people. You're not thinking about how to make yourself a better human being to make the world a better place. And that's what we need to be doing. So maybe not so much focusing on the trauma and focusing on ourselves and being so self-centered about all the things that we're doing. Maybe there was a time in our culture when self-esteem and recognizing trauma and all these things were necessary, but that time has passed and the pendulum has swung a little too far. So if you see yourself or you see your buddies, if you're going to be a good friend to somebody, if you're going to be a good family member to somebody, and you see them just spending too much time worrying about themselves and going further down the rabbit hole than is absolutely necessary to come to grips with something that has happened, that's when you need to step in. And that's one of the things that we're pretty good at as friends and teammates is that there's a time that you got to let someone deal with some stuff, but it can't be forever. And it can't, and like, once it starts to destroy you, the person, that once it starts to destroy the person that's your family member or your friend, that's when you gotta step in and be like, man, it's not about you. You're just being selfish. You got to be honest with people, and you got to be honest with yourself about these things. And so that's where we're at with trauma in our culture, and that's what I think. So there you go. That was the first one. Easy. All right. Next one is stop living in the past about the great things you did. No one cares. No one cares. Nobody cares. All right. We're all more like dogs than I think we care to admit, right? They say that dogs live in like the last 5 minutes. People, especially when the way that we view other people, we're much the same way. Maybe we live within like the last 24 hours. But no, like, if you're not bringing value today, then what are you doing? And if you're constantly bringing up like who you used to be, maybe you need to be that person again, right? Like, that we all know these people, like the people that get stuck in high school. High school were the best days of my life. Are you kidding me? High school was when you peaked. That's when you stopped trying to have a good time in life. Like, it's such a sad thing when people always want to talk about who they used to be. And it's not like we don't talk about who we used to be sometimes. You get older and have some injuries or whatever, and I'm never going to be, the person that I was when I was 28, thank goodness. And probably never going to run, 5 consecutive 6-minute miles ever again, mostly because I don't want to. But I'm not saying I wouldn't be capable, but like I'm working on a lot of other stuff that I'm doing. I'm better at a lot of different things that I wasn't good at when I was 28. And man, if all you do is talk about the past and just like everything else, right? Like a little bit of it around your buddies and some nostalgia is probably okay, but you just can't spend too much time there. If you're spending all your time in the past, then you're not looking where you're going, right? Like all the tropes that we have in our society, all the signs that are at the store that our wives buy to put in the bathroom. Don't look behind you. You're not going that way. But there's a little bit of truth to it, and that's why people like it. So don't live in the past. Man, there's a trend with some of these top ones. Am I the one that wrote these? I have no idea. You're not a victim. You need to have the mindset of you're happening to the pipeline. The pipeline isn't happening to you. We talk about this a lot. You need to be aggressive. You need to be the person that never forgets that you're the one in charge of what you're doing. Like you don't lose control of yourself. You're not a victim of the pipeline if you constantly remind yourself that this is something that you want to do. Just because you don't know what's happening and you're getting told to do something, you should be in violent agreement with what the cadre are telling you to do, because that's going to get you to where you want to be, right? And they're the people with the experience getting to where you are trying to get. You want to get the funny hat, you want to go down range or whatever it is, you want to get all these experiences. When they say something, it's not something that you don't want to do. It is absolutely something that you want to do. So don't fall into that victim mentality. That's a whole bunch of nonsense, and you don't want to be there. And we see it all the time. We see people fall off the edge. They become the victim. They let the pipeline happen to them. And then when something bad happens, it's not a learning event. It is a bad event. And then it snowballs and they end up out of the pipeline. It's a good time. All right. Lifeguards are a bit different than PJs. This must have come from a comment because maybe somebody said that the PJs are just like lifeguards. And that's kind of true, they just kind of sit there and they wait. And then when something bad happens, they dive in and they make the save and they talk about it for the rest of their lives. So there you go. They also probably all like knots and hacky sacks, and they wear anklets or whatever it is around their ankles, and cool. All right. Senior leaders take care of the small things. I don't know what that means. First of all, the term senior leaders is disgusting. It's stupid. It is so self-serving that it makes my skin crawl. You're a leader or you're not. Like, oh, well, I'm a senior leader because I'm at MAGCOM and I'm a general officer, or I'm a colonel and I'm a chief. Like, you're older. Got it. You made rank just like thousands upon thousands of people before you that also sat in that chair before you made the rank because they stayed in the Air Force long enough and they checked the boxes and didn't get DUIs. Or back in the day, maybe they got DUIs and got there. But today, checked the boxes and got there. Now you're like, I'm a senior leader because I went through these PME courses and I did these things, and now I call myself a senior leader. And as a senior leader, like, it's disgusting. But as leaders, if you are in charge of an organization, whether you are a leader or a manager, and I don't really care which one you are as long as you're good at what you do, the small things are the big things. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, and I forget who said it. It might have been Chief Bean, retired PJ, who said if it matters, or maybe it was Cologne Lopez. I don't know. Aaron knows these things because PJ stuff. But he said, and it was really smart, if it matters to the guys, then it matters. All right. So the small things like make a big difference. Your people's pay, your people's leave, how your unit manning document is done correctly, making sure that people are in the correct codes and all these other things, because those are going to make a huge impact on the lives of like the airmen and the young enlisted folks and your lieutenants as they come up through their career. And those early experiences in the military, in a lot of ways, determine, retainability, determine what kind of person that they're going to turn into in the military, whether it's it sucked for me when I was young, and therefore it's going to suck for you. So I'm not going to put effort into these little things because, having to deal with this myself made me a better NCO or airman or whatever it is. We've all heard that mentality from people before. Like you're not trying to create those monsters. So take care of the little things, take care of your people, set expectations for them that are clear, and then they will execute if they feel like the little things are taken care of, and if they feel like they have top cover. And that's probably the biggest thing. When I think about the little things, it doesn't take much to make your people feel comfortable, make your people feel like they're allowed to be creative, to bend the rules a little bit, and in my in our community, obviously there are times where when you get a commander's trust, when you get someone that says that they will absolutely take care of you, we want to take care of them too. I mean, we were in situations before where we were doing a few things overseas, and there are things that you just don't want to tell your commander, and you shouldn't tell your commander because he needs some plausible deniability if you get caught doing certain things. Not that like anybody would actually go to jail, but like there's all these stupid rules about crossing borders, and what kind of equipment can go into planes at different phases of different wartime scenarios, or we're not at war right now technically, so we can't do these things, but we need certain things in certain places to do our job, and our job is important because it's going to set the foundation for what we're doing tomorrow. And so there are certain things that you feel comfortable, and you feel like you have top cover, but like, hey boss, like we're going to make this happen, and you just don't really need to know or want to know why, and we're going to protect you. And it's like taking your team leader, your young team leader that's lieutenant or captain, and not putting all the equipment on their hand receipt, or not taking the op fund and putting it all on them, because the consequences for officers are so much different than the consequences for enlisted folks. If enlisted folks, a person like breaks a really expensive piece of equipment, you could probably just take a hat around your team and everybody throw a few bucks in, and they'll be made whole again after what they're allowed to take from that enlisted person, right? And so like there's kind of like a no harm no foul rule there. So you take care of people, but they will want to take care of you if you take care of them, and giving them the space to solve problems and to be creative and to make things happen on their own without your constant input, without you telling them exactly how to do things. That is a huge thing. So that's not necessarily a little thing, but like just creating that environment will create the squadron that you want, or the unit, or the team, or whatever it is that you want. So there you go. All right. Oh man, here's the thing, and I know Peaches has talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, but there's one on here that says people aren't scared of getting hurt, dying, or crashing planes. They're scared of getting in trouble. And this speaks to the type of leader that is not providing top cover, the type of leader that is trying to maintain a clean and doesn't rock the boat image so that it can make the next rank. A careerist that is going to pin anything negative, perceived negative, on their people that are below them. The person that does not want to go to the next person above them in rank and explain what happened and go to bat for their people. The person that is too lazy to educate themselves on why things happen. The person that doesn't want to take any risk because they don't want to get called to the table to explain it. Which odds are, and I've seen it, if you have a good leader and you have a good reason for doing what you're doing, and you trust your people, and something bad happens, and you're like, yeah, we corrected it and we learned from it, and hopefully nobody died, and you're going to have to go answer to the next person above you. They go up there and they explain it, and they take whatever heat rounds they have to take, but usually they're pretty good at turning around on them and being like, we're going after the mission. And that's the way it is. And if you're not willing to do that as a leader, to stick up for your people, they're going to be afraid of making mistakes. If you're the person that as soon as somebody makes a mistake, you jump down their throat, you don't treat it like a learning opportunity, that's the worst environment that you can possibly create for people. And I've talked about this before too, like the driving thing. Man, if all you do while you're driving is you're terrified of getting in an accident, and I think we've all seen these, older people maybe on the roads that are terrified of getting in accidents, and there's other people as well, but they just create more problems than they solve. And we should be in the business of creating problem solvers and not problem avoiders. And otherwise, we're not making any progress. And if we're not making any progress, we're moving backwards, because life is a treadmill and it ain't going forward. So that's what I think about that. All right. Whew. This is a big word. This must have been Chief Petrus, because he's a chief. Obfuscating your ownership of being overweight or in shape. It's just personal accountability, right? We heard a lot about this after COVID, when people would be like, man, like after COVID, during COVID, I got so fat and I just haven't been able to like get those pounds off. Or, you know, the food that we have is garbage, or blah, blah, blah. Or I don't know, my thyroid. You know, there's such a small percentage of the people, especially in the military, especially in the Air Force. The Air Force is not easy to get into. Like, we've been over this with recruiters. Just to join the Air Force is not an easy thing. And you go to, you know, your medical appointments and all these other things, you probably, the number of people in the Air Force with actual thyroid issues are very, very few. It's almost zero. It's probably statistically zero. You know what I mean? It's so small that it doesn't matter. It's an anomaly. It's a write-off. It's dust. So if people are not taking accountability for their fitness, that's a problem. And if you're that person and you come up with excuses, and you can make excuses for anything, right? And I've done excuses before. Let's talk a little trash about me before I go after you guys, because I'm you know, I think I've made my position on the fats, you know, pretty clear over time. When I was doing the prep course, right? So there was a time when I was brought in to help develop the curriculum and be one of the first instructors. And then the op soup, the number 2 guy in the organization that was running prep, because prep was a huge project. It was almost like a little squadron, right? When they moved me up to the number 2 guy, I was so invested in making that organization work. I was so invested in making it successful, and making it as good as it could be, as in protecting that organization and making sure the students were getting what they needed, making sure there was a balance in the experience that the students got between the civilian coaches and my you know, military cadre. I mean, I talked to my wife about it later, and I was like, hey, for like 2 years, was I like the worst person to be around? And she was like, yeah, you were not present during prep at home. And I went overboard, you know, and I didn't work out enough. I was putting in a ton of steps every day, because I was talking to almost everyone in the organization every single day. I'm out there with the students, you know, every once in a while an instructor would fall out and I'd have to do things. I'd show up early mornings for, you know, the early morning events. You know, I was probably taking in, and this is a statement coming from me, my caffeine intake was probably too much, which is difficult to do for me, by the way. My tolerance is pretty insane. But like, I wasn't gaining too much weight. I wasn't getting like just fat. I actually did gain a little bit of weight after I got fired from that position, because I wasn't doing this anymore, and I had to redevelop some fitness habits afterwards. But I wasn't healthy, and even though I still looked okay in my uniform, I think, and even, you know, and even though that the organization was good, you know, my family life wasn't where it should be, and I was making excuses for it. And the excuse was like, this is such an important thing. Like, you know, the chief of staff of the Air Force at the time had come down and basically earmarked money specifically for that program. You know what I mean? And it was a lot of money. And so, you know, like, it was important, and it was important to me, and I wanted to make it, work. And it wasn't all like just because the Air Force thought it was important. You know, like, I've been there since the beginning. You know, like, my name is also associated with this course, and so I wanted to make it successful. And so I went too far, and I made excuses about, you know, my fitness. Like, and it was still good enough. Like, I wasn't going to fail a PT test, right? But, you know, on the occasions that I did go out there and do stuff with the cones, it was a lot harder than it should have been. You know, just keeping up with my cals is not enough. You know, I wasn't lifting weights the way I should have. I wasn't deadlifting the way I should have. You know, for me, with my frame, if I don't, you know, keep my posterior chain strong, like, carrying weight is just not that easy. And so I made a lot of excuses, and let a lot of things go that I shouldn't have. And we can do this in any facet in life, right? Is we go too far. And if you're sitting behind a desk all day, if you're a cyber person, or if you're a personnel and or finance, and granted, I don't understand the kind of stress that y'all deal with every day. Like, you're never done in those jobs, and I get it. You're a customer service representative, and you guys are the butt of a lot of jokes online, in personal and finance, and you're kind of like the last stop for every frustrated person on base that has a problem that they can't solve themselves. But you're going to be better if you're fit. You're going to be better if you're taking control of your life. You're going to be able to deal with that stress better if you stop making excuses about your fitness. And that goes across the board, right? Like, if you're on team, just because you can ruck a lot and barely pass your PT test, it doesn't mean that you're optimized, right? It doesn't mean that you're doing as good a job as you can. And granted, we all kind of go through these ebbs and flows, and sometimes you push really hard at one thing and everything takes a back seat. But you can't be like that forever. And so if you're out there and I mean, you have a mirror, if you're unhappy. And I don't run into a ton of people in this world that don't say that they want to lose weight or be more fit. Everybody says it. So do it. And the only person that can do it is you. And stop making excuses. I don't have time. Everybody knows that's nonsense. Because if I ask you what kind of TV shows you watch or books you read or any of the other things that you do, you could do it. Like, one of the busiest people I know on this planet, his kids are in sports. He owns a company, spends an amazing amount of hours doing what he does, and he's very successful. But he's very successful because he is psychotic. Like, he never, he has a very nice home and he's never home. But he will take that time, like he'll take his kids to soccer practice or whatever, and he'll go for a run himself during that time. He doesn't just sit in his car and catch up on work emails the entire time, because he knows that the more fit he is, the more he can do, right? His base level fitness for him is a non-negotiable. So he finds the time to put in the miles, to set up a little garage gym and do what he does. And it's not like he's a super triathlete, but like, if that guy can find time, we all can find time. So I beat that dead horse. Let's move on. Boop, 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 boop. All right. All right. EPME. I think I did write this one. Specifically, the new EJPME2 as a prereq for senior and COA requirement. It is it's stupid, and it's a leader amnesia. It's backwards. Man, my opinion on PME is it should be optional. If you want, it should be like, if I want to become a senior or a master sergeant or a chief, and I really want it that bad, I should volunteer to go to these courses. And you're going to find out real quick if your courses are worth anything, if it's a volunteer basis. You're going to find out real quick if the command, the Air Force, values what people are learning. And I think this is one of the problems with this professional military education that's compulsory, is maybe when you go from an airman to an NCO, but that should just be purely educational on how to do the paperwork. And most of the rest of these should be educational on how to just do the paperwork as well. But if it's compulsory for everybody, then you don't know if it's working. And I would argue that for segments of the Air Force population, it is entirely unnecessary to send them to these courses. And I get that there's a lot of good ideas, and I'm not saying that they're bad ideas, but they don't apply to everybody, and they don't provide value across the board. And so if it was a volunteer thing and people could actually see that it makes a difference, or if you had to compete to get into these courses because going to these courses makes you that much, more eligible, or sets you up better for promotion, then it would mean a lot more. But compulsory, everybody has to do it, and trying to make it apply to everybody, and then not going over paperwork and the stuff that everybody actually does, and instead trying to turn everybody into quote unquote leaders and strategic thinkers, especially on the enlisted side, I think it's just a giant waste of time and effort. And we could be doing better things with our time and our effort. And we could send a much smaller percentage of folks through professional military education and make them compete for it and find out if it's worth anything. Because if certain organizations just don't value it because the product that they get back from that that education isn't any better, or doesn't come up with better ideas, or is not a better leader, or is not a better manager, then that's good feedback for the institution. If something is compulsory, then it doesn't provide value. It's valueless if everybody has to do it. Everybody that comes out of these schools is not a leader, and even though they want to focus on your leadership qualities, not everybody that comes out of these schools is a great public speaker or writer. Not everybody that comes out of these schools is good at any of these things, because everybody goes, and everybody's not going to be that way. And so it doesn't mean anything. And another thing that happens is when you force everybody to go to it, you kind of have to teach down to the bottom rung of people that are there. And whether you want to believe it or not, amongst all the tech sergeants in the Air Force, there is a hierarchy of people that are going to be good leaders, all the way down to the people that should probably not be in the Air Force anymore, right? If you make all of them go to the exact same course to learn the same things, and almost nobody fails these courses, at least not for academics, then what are you proving? What are you proving by going to that course? Nothing. You proved nothing, because everybody goes and everybody makes it. It's just a rite of passage, and it doesn't provide a lot of value. Because I'll tell you, people come back from senior NCOA, they're not crushing their unit manning documents. They don't have a better understanding of the assignments process. And this is the functional manager me getting upset, old me, about a lot of these things that they don't teach you, because they're like, you should be learning that at your base. What? Okay, but they don't. All right. And people, when they're at work, don't have the time. So you pull us out of our job for 5 weeks to go here, and you want me to be a strategic leader. You want me with the nurses, security forces, first sergeants, all these other people that have all these different kinds of jobs. You want us to all be strategic leader thinkers once we pin on, senior mass sergeant. When we go to NCOA, you want us all to be great writers and public speakers and all these other things. It's a waste of time. And if everybody has to go, then it's worthless. Okay, moving on. The victim male thing. Back to culture. Let's talk about culture. And I have seen this a lot lately, and it's getting a little old. Dudes, speaking of the men specifically, do not get sucked in to this too deep into this whole, men are victim movement. We are men. Be a man. I know that the old school man thing might be looked down upon. The don't show your emotions. The just get stuff done. Your job is to work, no matter what, and provide and to do your job, and to provide a steady, unwavering rock for your family to lean on. There's a lot of goodness in that. So we see it on the internet a lot these days as guys want to get on and complain. Women don't understand me, or complaining about all the different things. Go out there and be a man and make a difference. Stop going to the internet to complain about how hard it is to be a man. A, nobody cares, and B, especially the men that are out there making a difference, they don't care. So do better, take control of your lives, and do what you need to do. It kind of goes for everybody, but the whole victim male movement is, I'm not saying it's not grounded in anything, but I just don't think it's doing a whole lot of good. All right. Boop, 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 boop. External versus internal expectations. Man, this is one of those things where I think I was either driving or in the shower. And like when you have like white noise in the background and you're doing a task that you've done a million times, you don't have to think about it, and you have these ideas, and in your mind at the moment, it's like a totally fleshed out idea. And you're like, man, I could speak about this for like an hour straight. And then you write it down, and then you come back to it 3 months later, and you're like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means anymore. I do kind of know what it means. Your internal expectations for yourself need to be higher than the external expectations of the thing that's around you, or they need to line up, right? And we talked about this before, like when I was talking about being in violent agreement with everything, that your cadre are telling you to do. If your internal expectations for your performance do not align with the cadre's expectations for your performance, then you're going to struggle. you know, and you need to really work on your personal expectations for yourself every day, and maybe not worry so much about external expectations. Like you do need to worry about it because you need to pass these things, especially as a student. And we talk about the pipeline a lot on this podcast, but in life in general, if you don't have internal expectations, if you don't have internal principles, if you don't have an internal understanding of who you are, where you're going, what you're trying to do, or your internal drive to just keep chugging towards something and saying like, I'm going to figure this out later. Cause I'm a lot like that. Like I start moving in a lot of directions and I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. But you just keep your eyes open for the opportunities. And as you learn more and you gain more data, you can start making decisions at that point. Right. And that's a huge part of just taking the first step is with no data, you don't know what you're doing, but you need to step off and start doing something. Because if you're just standing still, what are you doing? You're moving backwards, right? The whole treadmill thing again. So no one can give you the internal expectations. And if you only rely on external expectations, those run out. What are you going to do after you get your beret? What are you going to do after you check off your checklist of things that you wanted to do or the things that are expected of you in your career? What do you do now? Where are you going? What are you doing? And this happens to a lot of us or at least this happened to me, is after my first deployment, especially, there wasn't, like all the things that I looked forward to, all the things that I wanted to do so bad to test myself to know if I could perform under certain situations, in certain situations, under certain stimuli. I kind of answered all those questions and I didn't know where I wanted to go from there. I had an idea, and I kind of worked towards something until I met my wife and derailed me again. Ended up being an instructor, and that kind of started the whole second half of my career, really. But it's easy to get lost if you don't maintain those internal expectations for where you're going and for the kind of person that you want to be. Don't give that control over to the external. All right, I have a lot of control things, don't I? Make accountability great again. We've talked a lot about Comac. And Comac, if Comac listens to any of these, the commander of ACC, we're just kind of using you as an example. Like I don't know the commander of ACC. I don't, it's just the one that that was the most visible at the time. He was the commander that put down he was the first one to go public, I think, with the, everybody needs to, shave and be fit and all these other things. And ACC is a huge command, and it's probably the most important command, or the most forward-leaning command. I don't know. It is like the command in the Air Force, I think. Like all the other commands, obviously, are super important. The ACC casts a big shadow. But when we talk about accountability, we were looking at some leaders' bios the other day because we're gonna talk about a base that is jacking some stuff up here pretty soon, and you can't hold people accountable if you're not accountable to yourself, at least not for very long, or it's not going to be as effective, right? The whole accountability thing, it's hard. I get it. You don't want to come down on your people. No one wants to be the bad guy anymore. No one wants to do the paperwork. No one wants to, get after their own. It seems like the people that do want to do those things are kind of weird these days. It's one or the other, right? It's the overbearing, master sergeant that's a giant a-hole, or just the people that are just, man, I'm just moving through here trying to make my next stripe and move on. And those are the two things. But accountability, just like everything else, starts with leadership. And if leadership is not holding themselves accountable and not holding their peers accountable, then how do you push that down? And when I go onto your base website, if the commander looks fit, it's like fine. And that's just like the first thing I look at, right? But if your command chief has a giant double chin and doesn't, it goes from like chin to double chin and there's no neck into like this like round mass of uniform, and I'm not going to listen to anything you say, because you get to pick your command chief. And how come y'all aren't like going on runs together? There was a handbook that we had in AFSOC for a while that was penned by or at least Colonel Buller, who we've had on the podcast, was a part of it. And he said the team leader and the team sergeant, their relationship should be intimate, which we love to make fun of, right? All the jokes that you can think of about that, especially when we were overseas, and choosing bunks and all that other stuff, came into play. But man, if you are a commander and your chief looks like melted ice cream, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you saying about your organization? What are you saying about yourself? If you're willing to handpick a command chief that looks like that, what are you telling the entire organ? What are you telling every enlisted person in that organization? And I don't care if they have injuries. They still can control how much stuff they put in their mouth. Like, if you think that it's complicated, go over to Tyler Minton on Instagram, Tyler Minton Nutrition, I think, and read some of his stuff. It's not complicated. It's math. I don't care if he looks shredded when he takes his shirt off. I do care that he doesn't look like the Michelin Man. I care that he doesn't look like a Ghostbusters ghost. You know what I mean? And the thing that you are saying to all of your enlisted people is that when you make chief, standards don't apply. We do not value self-control and discipline in the upper enlisted ranks as an officer corps. In this command, I do not value self-control and discipline. That is what you are saying. You can argue with me all day long about that. I don't care. If you think that you are saying something other than that, and if you think that what it says, their paperwork says about that person, and they could be fantastic people. I'm not saying that, like, if I met some of these chiefs, I wouldn't like them. They're probably fantastic humans. But at the end of the day, as an airman, going to your base page and looking at that picture, I'm seeing that everything that I've read on Reddit, everything that I've read on the internet about senior NCOs is true. They don't take PT tests. They're not held accountable. They're not disciplined and accountable people. They're just not. And that's what you're saying by doing that. And until you're willing to step on that, throw yourself on that grenade, whatever it is, to make that decision, to say no to somebody that looks great on paper because they don't fit the image, because they can't stop stuffing their face with food, because they kill a 6-pack of beer every night, or whatever it is that's making them look like that, until you make them accountable to the standards that you're pushing down to everybody else, then you're full of crap and you're a hypocrite. So, like, I don't care about the officers as much. I really don't, because I wasn't an officer. But the image that you're letting the enlisted folks get away with, you're shirking your responsibility as a commander by doing that. And you're definitely promoting the wrong image and the wrong messaging. And when you try to push it down, everybody's just going to know that there's rules for me and rules for thee, and they're two different things. So you got to fix that. I got a little fired up there for a second. All right. All right. Next one. Wow. Leadership. Word. Let's not forget that your people, who are a mix of enlisted officers and civilians, are the ones that make stuff happen. That's not what's written, but that's what I said. Because I'm not sure if there's going to be members only. I'm not getting that fired up. All right. And also, I'm trying not to cuss as much anymore, because parents, I want everybody to be able to listen to this together. And if you're 13 and your parents are listening to this with you, I don't want them to be like, let's keep it PG-13. You know what I mean? Because people are people. But the officers or the leaders that think it's about them, man, like, I don't know what else to say about that. That's wrong. Like, at a certain point in your career, it's not about you anymore. On the enlisted side, in our community, right? Because we're small and because you're kind of, I don't want to say rushed into a managerial position early, but like as a senior tech sergeant, it became apparent that it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the young folks actually doing the job. And as you make master and senior, it becomes even more apparent that it's not about you anymore. And it can be hard. It can be hard letting go of that. And as you move up in rank and responsibility, and then you move up to, squadron, group, wing, NAF, MAGCOM, it's not like you're not the same person you were when you were younger, to a certain extent, and it's easy to want to jump in there and solve problems. I remember one of the hardest things in my career, you know, was when we stood up the South T pipeline. Going back, a lot of it, I was like the subject matter expert or whatever, quote unquote, that worked on a lot of the curriculum. As we stood up the first pipeline, and I was doing a lot, right? I was like the doer. And even when we did the prep course, when we stood that up, I was deep in the weeds on all that stuff. And my opinion, came to fruition on the pages and the way that the course was laid out, with guidance from, the chief or the senior that was helping put that together and all that other stuff. But there was a very direct connection between my effort and what ended up in the paperwork. And when I was a staff sergeant, it was very much, I'm a doer. As a tech sergeant early on, when I'm deploying, I'm doing all the stuff. But then when we stood up the SR pipeline, and I was moved up to like group. I was kind of in between group, and then I moved up to the MAGCOM. I had to become the functional manager. You have to let go, and I had very clear ideas of what I wanted, and I had things that I didn't want to compromise on, and I have this experience, but it's not mine anymore. It's not my career field anymore. As a master sergeant or a senior master sergeant, I am the minority. I'm not making things happen. I'm not going to have to live with the consequences of the way that things happen. And I also don't have the best ideas because I'm so far removed from the day-to-day life of our airmen and our students and our NCOs that it would be super arrogant of me to think that the way that I think it needs to be done is the only and correct way that it should be done. And so it was difficult, though, and I'm not saying it wasn't, is to kind of push that, and it felt wrong to a certain extent, right? Is to let somebody else do that. And it was like kind of like, he had experience, the guy that led the charge. There were a couple guys that kind of led the charge on that, and they were awesome. And they had some experience like rewriting their courses in AATC, and that's why they were brought in to do these things. And they did a fantastic job. And did it look the way that I wanted to look? No. Is it probably better? And did it actually happen? And did they push through like the majority of the changes that needed to happen? And was the career field set up for success after that? Just based on us getting the paperwork done, yes. And they're still in, and I'm not. So making that decision and being conscious about it at a certain point in your career is super important. You're not the doer anymore, and you're not the career field anymore. You're not. Like, just because if you're a career field manager or a functional manager, or you are, a colonel or a general, that's not your career field anymore. You're not the doer. And to think that because you have a title that it's yours, no, you are responsible to the folks that are doing the job to take care of the little things, to do the things the best, to do the things that they need you to do so that they can do their job the best way possible, because they have the answers and you don't, I promise. So don't forget who's doing the work. And just because you have a title and rank and all that other stuff, have some fun with it. It's fun. You get to travel around to bases, you get to meet people, and that's what you should be doing. Meet as many of the younger folks as you can and get a feel for it, and get motivated to take care of them. That's what you should be doing. Moving on. All right, we actually did a podcast on this one, parents' advice for what to say during different parts of the pipeline. Check that episode out. It was actually one of the ones I was pretty proud of. We have guidance counselors in here. This came from some of the other conversations we had. Speaking to like high school folks for a second, it's easy to think that adults in authoritative positions in your school, especially, know what they're talking about, but they probably don't. Not really. Not if you are interested in this if you're listening to this podcast, odds are they have no idea what to tell you. They cannot connect with that at all. They are so far down the line of just doing whatever they're doing, right? And I don't want to say that they're all. I said it earlier. I said they were just like, piles of broken dreams or regret or whatever. If you become a guidance counselor, because I don't know anybody that was like in high school or middle school, and it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to come back here and be a guidance counselor. There's probably like one or two people. It's a big country with a lot of people. There's probably some people that are like that, but it doesn't seem to me like very many people when they're young aspire to be a guidance counselor when they grow up. There's not that many people that aspire to be a high school teacher. There's a few, right? There's not that many people that really want to be a principal of a high school. And I'm gonna say it. I don't think they're the most elite people in our society, and you're trying to go do something that's almost impossible. So if you talk to these people and ask them for advice, you need to start understanding right now that the way that you and your friends are in high school and how much you don't know about the world, it's kind of just going to be that way for the rest of your life. People don't get a lot smarter. A lot of people don't get a lot smarter. And it's weird. It's weird being an adult and being around other adults, middle-aged people, and you can see the people that never left high school or junior high or whatever. And it's like, oh, like we're all just still the same people. And we look like grown-ups. We look like the people that we thought had everything figured out. But so understanding like the hierarchy of our society, or maybe not even the hierarchy, like they have no frame of reference for what you're going into. You might be one of the lucky people that actually has like some like, Marine recon vet that got out and decided to become a high school teacher. And for those, for the folks that get out, the vets that get out and become teachers and, correctly try to mold people's minds and teach kids how to think and to take care of kids and to try to change the culture, like that's awesome. That's fantastic. But odds are you don't have one of those at your high school. The odds are pretty high that you don't. You might have a vet, but even if you have a vet that didn't do combat or anything, or a combat job or any of that other type of stuff, if you're trying to get into this community, they still don't have a great frame of reference for what you're trying to do. And so to take all their advice with a grain of salt, because they ended up where they're at and you're going to go somewhere else and you're going to crush it. So don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm going to get some comments about that one. All right. Hey, let's talk about, we'll finish with this. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I touched on it. How to start something. Starting is hard. And it's one of those skill sets that you get a little bit better at as you go on in life. But it's still like, so like my starting process, right? So like I have a lot of projects that I'm trying to do right now. And one of those projects is, it's not going to be a huge surprise to anybody, is I'm trying to write a book, right? And I'm working with one of my buddies on his book as well. And it's funny because you can listen to authors talk and then they're like, man, you just got to start writing. But I'm like, what am I going to write about? I don't have the story in my mind. But like, if I look back at my career and I give myself the advice, or I take the advice that I give everybody else, you just got to start down a path, because that's who I am. I just need to start and then start figuring stuff out later. And I'm kind of still in the beginning stages of that. Like I'm trying to write every day. I'm trying to do different things, and it gets more complicated as you learn about the process and like how hard it is to keep track of all your characters, and then going back through it and revising all the chat. Like you immediately want to revise the previous chapter when you write another chapter. At least I do, right? Like I want to go back there and be like, man, I don't think that's the way that guy would speak in his voice. I'm trying to give all your characters different voices and backgrounds, and like how much detail do you go into? Who am I writing this for? But the starting point, sorry, I got into like my own issues about trying to write. The starting point is just starting. If you are sitting on your couch right now, or you're sitting in your car and you're like, there's no way I could do this. There's no way. Go for a walk tonight. Go for a walk, or go for a small run, or do 5 push-ups tonight and 10 sit-ups. That's where it starts. And then do it again tomorrow night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night. And you're going to start to learn. Like it's weird that I think sometimes we think that physical training is different than learning. There's so much that you learn by pushing yourself physically and starting out that way. But you have to start. And really it is you got to get rid of all the voices in your head, or you have to overcome them. You have to create other voices in your head. If you're like me, right? Like, and I've talked about this before, like I got a million voices in my head, right? And I got to I got to learn how to control them. And sometimes I have to create other voices in my head to overcome the voices in my head that are telling me that, we don't want to do this, or you're not good enough to do this. And no one's ever going to, listen to you if you start a podcast, and no one's going to buy your book if you write a book. And, all these things, like, you're not a runner anymore. You're retired. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to work out anymore because you're retired. Like, man, find a way to just get to step one and then the step two, and give yourself some time to do it, and give yourself a little bit of leeway to change it every once in a while, and then understand that you're going to fail. And that's really what it is come to grips with that. Because I think one of the reasons that all the voices in my head say, don't do this, is because I know I'm not, I've failed enough in my life, and I've started new things enough to know that there are going to be humility moments that come along. And those moments are not comfortable for me. I'm not someone that likes to fail. I have a very, I don't know, I have a very healthy ego, I think, and almost too healthy, definitely too healthy sometimes, overbearing sometimes, and overly sensitive at certain points as well. And I don't like to fail. It doesn't feel good. It's not like it's something that I ever got comfortable with, and in 20 years of my job, you try to avoid failure so much, and not just avoid it, but like, you're trying to push the envelope, and you don't want to fail because, potentially all these things are riding on your success. And I don't like it. I don't like that feeling at all. I don't like feeling like I'm not good enough. But that's the way to do it, is understand that you're going to do it and just start, and maybe not think about the failure. And then when you hit that failure point, start again. You might have to start from step one 100 different times, and that's okay. Like, that's the way it goes. Like, as much as I don't like to talk about Goggins, like, go read his book. It's not like he woke up one day and completely changed his life and never fell off the wagon. And maybe he wasn't the greatest SEAL, but like, the things that he does, he started the way that he started, and he got up to a certain level, and then he fell back down again. And that's going to happen to everybody. And the ability to start again is huge, And I recently had to start over a whole bunch of things about my my physical training, my workouts, because I realized that I was doing things wrong for a long time, and I never actually took the time to do these things the right way and build the correct foundations. I was just young enough to push through things and do things the wrong way. So what am I doing at 40-something years old? Starting over again, and trying to build the foundations and do it the right way, so that the next 20 years I can do it the right way. So that's the starting. Maybe we'll do one more. Here we go. Oh, here's the last one. Ooh, this one's gonna be good. Teachers, stop pushing your kids to go to college. I would say teachers and parents and friends and television shows and everything else. Let me ask y'all a question. And if you don't know, and like, say if you're like 16, ask your parents this question: how difficult is it to get a plumber out to your house right now? How difficult is it to get an AC repairman out to your house? How difficult would it be to get someone to come out and weld something for you? Like, how long is the wait list for those? And how much are those folks getting paid? If you learn one of these trades and you're good at it, how much money are you going to make? Like, how much money do you think that your local, air conditioning repair company makes every year? And they don't have to be a big town, or like, maybe go to the biggest city near you and take a look around. I'm just saying, college is not the only way. I don't know when this started. The whole, everybody needs to be a doctor or a lawyer, and everybody needs to have a bachelor's degree, like as a minimum of education. I don't think college really educates people anymore. Like, when I was growing up, I went to this high school where they tried really hard to teach us how to think and not what to think, which is a difficult thing to do. But we're not teaching people how to think anymore. They're teaching people what to think. And standardized testing is not a good measure of your intelligence or your capabilities or your creativity or your potential to start a business, to do anything in this world. It's not a great indicator of that. And so I think we get stuck a lot of times, in these things, and it's hard. Like, I struggle with this as well. Like, I got kids, like, I'm sending them to a school where the like 99% of these kids come out and they're like getting scholarships to college. And that's kind of like what it is. It's like a college prep school. And it's difficult to not like say like you should go to college after I spent all this money sending you to this school, for years, for 13 years or whatever it is. But if my kids come to me and they say, I don't want to go to college right now, I want to do something else, as long as they're doing something, I'm going to be cool with it. And my wife, I don't know, we're going to have a conversation about that. But there's a lot of things you can do in this world, and a college education is not required for all those things. And also, in that vein, everybody should come in the Air Force enlisted and then become a warrant officer to become an officer, because the way that we're doing things now is stupid. So thanks for listening. Head over to onesready.com, pick yourself up some merch, like, subscribe, leave comments, support the podcast, please. We do a lot of work on this, and it's nice to get the DMs every once in a while saying like, hey, I was out in a place, and we get these all the time, like from random people, is, we were out talking to a bunch of folks out in this place, and they all said that they listen to your podcast, and like, you're really helping spread the word about, Air Force Special Warfare and all this other stuff. I'm just telling you guys, it's going to be hard to do this forever if we don't get a little support. All right. So the least you can do is at least like and subscribe, leave some comments, leave some reviews. I really appreciate it. And if you have a little extra cash and you can head over to the website and buy some of the merch, that would be awesome. So we will catch y'all later, and train hard. Bye.